on a yearly basis for the country's economy.
All right, so one of the questions, of course, we'll need to ask will be, does Nigeria actually at this stage need a transport commission, a transport sector commission, considering the plethora of other government agencies already dealing with that sector? Now, how will the transport commission turn around the transport sector for the better?
Wow. These are some of the questions we seek to elicit answers from our guests on the program. Well, Kingsley, that is just not the topic that we're looking at today. There are other issues.
That's right. It's another very critical one, as we hinted in our headlines. We also intend to discuss the latest set of allegations by the Transparency International and the Nigerian military with regard to the operations in the northeast. In other words, dealing with insurgency, and matters arising there from. You recall that the Nigerian military itself has had to deal with allegations of human rights violations by Amnesty International. Now it is allegation of corruption. So we'll be dealing with that subject matter. So it's a two-topic conversation segment that we have on the program today. It's Good Morning Nigeria, and my name is Kingsley Osadolo. We're broadcasting live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Network. It's Africa's largest, by the way.
It is. We'll take pride in that. Welcome to the program. My name is Blessing Abu. It's good to have you join us. And like we said, we're showing live on NTA. Time now to take a look at what is happening on the news, and we'll join. And as soon as you get to hear that, so other complimentary segments will be coming on the program today. Newspaper review, business, sports, as well as foreign news. And the weather outlook, it's been quite cool.
Yes, it's been quite cool. It had some storms, that's at the onset of the weekend. But yesterday, it threatened to rain in the Federal Capital Territory. It might have rained elsewhere, but it didn't rain here in the Federal Capital Territory. So we hope you had, we hope you had a nice weekend, great sporting weekend, for sports fans. Saturday and Sunday, of course, we had a lot of tennis and then also soccer. We hope you're able to take some of those stories in the course of the remainder of our bulletin. So let's go over now to Ann Jibuno for the news. Hi, Ann. How are you?
Fine, thank you, Kingsley. Good morning, Blessing.
Right. Good morning, Ann.
Good morning, and thanks for joining us this morning. The presidency says the Buhari administration will drive the new executive orders signed last week vigorously in line with its determination to significantly transform the business environment in the country. A statement by spokesperson to the acting president, Laolu Akonde, indicates that as part of measures to drive the reforms intended in the executive orders, an interactive event will hold in Abuja where the acting president would be discussing the subject matter and promoting made-in-Nigeria products with a cross-section of middle-level, senior public and civil servants. While noting that the interactive forum would be open for live coverage by a number of television stations and live streaming, Akande added that ensuring the effective implementation of the orders are critical for the overall prosperity of Nigerians and Nigeria. The statement adds that as part of activities commemorating the second year of the Buhari administration, a presidential-level report card event on the social investment programs of the Buhari presidency would be held at the presidential villa on May 29th. Nigerian troops finally dominate the vast Falgore Forest, Kano State, after flushing out criminals. The Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Tukur Buratai, and Kano State Governor Abdullahi Ganduje were in the forest to appraise the ongoing exercise Habing Kunama 2.
Our troops have dominated this forest, the route between Kano, Saminaka, and Jos, and along the Kaduna axis. Now we started from southern Kaduna, and a lot of arms caches have been recovered. Ammunition have been recovered. Criminals, cattle rustlers, kidnappers, and indeed the armed robbers and other bandits have also been arrested.
The Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, is establishing a training and research institute in Lafia, Nasarawa State to enhance capacity building of its personnel in line with the anti-graft posture of the present administration. Governor Umaru Tanko Almakura, while donating 50 hectares of land to the EFCC for the project, urged all Nigerians to support the ongoing war against corruption.
We do this to encourage and support the activities of EFCC in what it is doing to support the focus and mission of this administration in sanitizing this country, to ensure that it is corrupt-free.
And this is a mark that we will never forget it. And inshallah, Latvia will be open to even international community.
The Niger Delta Development Commission, NDDC, has stated its readiness to partner with the Edo State government in the construction of the Benin-Abraka Road. Chairman of the NDDC board, Senator Victor Ndoma-Egba, stated this during a working visit to Edo State Governor Godwin Obaseki.
NDDC is willing to partner with you for the construction of the Benin-Abraka Road.
I want to thank you immensely for accepting to collaborate with us on the Benin-Abraka Road. This road is of high priority and of great economic benefit to the state.
Well, Katsina State has joined the federal government's campaign to promote made-in-Nigeria goods by encouraging handcrafts among women to enable locally made products compete favorably in the global market. More than 200 women from the 34 local government areas of the state participated in arts and crafts exhibition, which showcased the potential of the state.
So when you empower women as a whole, you are empowering the whole family and the society at large. You no longer depend on the revenues generated from oil. So we are trying to look inwards to look for sources that are non-oil revenue sources.
The Central Council of Jamaatul Nasrul Islam has resolved to begin collecting taxes and levies within Emirates to assist in addressing the challenges of child destitution, poverty and hunger among Muslims. Sultan of Sokoto, Mohammed Saad Abubakar, said this at this year's pre-Ramadan meeting in Kaduna.
Islamic tradition to go around begging. So what causes children to go around the street is hunger, is poverty, is the lack of well-being of their parents. We sometimes don't even know where they are. How can we work very strongly to ensure these children are on the streets?
Effort of the Al-Majri integration into the mainstream of school system, which was began some time ago, is being revisited. How we can partner with the government, and that if the government will bring back these schools to us to manage, we'll be glad.
Well, that's the news for now. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Kingsley and Blessing after this break.
A bomb explosion or gunshots of an active shooter, that might be a terror attack. At such times, always remember 3 action words: run, hide, report. Don't try to run towards the terror scene to save the situation, because there might be a second bomb blast or another attack. Run far away and take cover. Make sure you are safe first. Yes, it is in our nature to sympathize over the hurt, but remember, only trained personnel can help in such situations. When in a secured environment, promptly call relevant authorities and help will come. For anonymous reporting, call 09630-3250-5 or 0813-2222-106. If you see something, say something. Nigeria unite against terrorism.
This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
In Nigeria, there is one sound we need to silence. So let's silence toothache before it starts with Oral-B All-Round Protection. Its advanced technology helps prevent both tooth holes and gum problems that can lead to tooth loss. It strengthens your teeth, giving them all-round protection. Because the only sound we really want to hear is that of our future. For healthier, stronger teeth in 1 week.
So what's up, sweetheart? You really look like you're up to something.
I have a secret.
Okay.
I'll be going to Europe. next week.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Like you have your visa, your passport, your plane ticket?
No, not that way. Some men are helping us. We pay them, they take us through the desert, and then we cross the sea into Europe.
The desert, the sea. Isn't that the route where many have died?
Yes, it is indeed a very dangerous journey. In 2016 alone, 4,900 people died while crossing the Mediterranean Sea to enter Europe. Many were Nigerians. For the very few who survived the journey, they are forced into prostitution or other crimes just to survive. Eventually, they will be arrested and deported to Nigeria. Don't be a victim. Don't go this way.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by NTA.
Welcome back. If you just tuned in, the program is Good Morning Nigeria. Now let's take the business report for the day. Islamic Development Bank plans development agenda to aid infrastructure development in Nigeria. Let's find out more details with Amina and Najim on this, as well as other business reports.
Nigeria has called on the Islamic Development Bank to conclude preparations and commence the implementation of pending projects approved by the bank in the country. The Nigerian delegation to the just-ended 42nd annual meeting of the Islamic Development Bank had, during a business meeting with the Islamic Development Bank Group Vice President for Operations, Nigeria's former Minister for Finance, Dr. Mansour Mukhtar, urged the bank to fast-track the implementation of the ongoing projects being funded by the bank in the country. Permanent Secretary in the Federal Ministry of Finance, Dr. Mahmoud Isa Dutse, who led the delegation, has representatives of the Minister of Finance, Kemi Adeosun, described the meeting as a fruitful, where the position of the country was explained and mutual understanding reached between both sides. While expressing appreciation for the support and cooperation Nigeria is receiving from the bank, the Permanent Secretary reminded the bank of the request made by the President Muhammadu Buhari in 2016 to harness efforts and resources for the reconstruction and recovery of the Northeast in collaboration with the World Bank and the Africa Development Bank. The Islamic Development Bank has provided loan facilities for a number of ongoing projects in some states of the Federation, including the construction and equipping of 4 science secondary schools in Osun State and water supply in Zaria and Ilesha. Nigeria and the banks are negotiating finance for the construction of the second Niger Bridge on the private-public partnership model. The dollar this week recorded its worst outing in more than 3 months against the naira, exchanging at 380 naira to $1 in the parallel market. The local currency was exchanging at 285 to $1 on Friday and has maintained steady decline in the parallel market in the last 1 month. Also, at the official foreign exchange market, the CBN conducted its weekly secondary market intervention sales auction, offering $100 million for spot and short-tenured forward, as well as continued its daily forex intervention in order to stabilize rates and improve dollar liquidity. And in other developments, the 256th Monetary Policy Committee meeting of the Central Bank of Nigeria is scheduled to commence today. A recalibration in monetary policy is expected as output gaps linger on, coupled with an amplified growth in non-performing loans. Financial experts say there is need to retweak monetary policy such that it can support economic agents and allow them cohabit with double-digit inflation. Similarly, indicators from the Nigerian Stock Exchange closed trading Friday with a marginal growth of 0.04% to see the market capitalization close at 9.718 trillion naira, following the end of week activities. Here are some more graphic details. And that wraps up the business package. I am Amina Dushain.
All right, thank you very much, Dayamida Nujem, for the business news on Good Morning Nigeria. Next for us, of course, we're taking a look at the headlines on the front pages of some of today's newspapers.
Let's welcome Ominio Den for today's review as Say joins us this morning. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Good morning, Nigeria.
All right. Omini, we hope you had a nice weekend.
I tried my very best. I worked all through the weekend. I really didn't have a weekend.
Hard working as always. Thank you
for hard work, more work.
Thanks for being here. Let's begin by taking a look at the front page of the Leadership newspaper. The Leadership is quite busy with a number of stories on its front page, but the lead story says federal government seeks alternative to $15 billion lake charge recharge and wants faster project implementation from Islamic Bank and ends almost $300,000 as dividends. So federal government seeks alternative to $15 billion lake charge recharge. Details of that story can be found on page 5. Now, above that, you also have another headline, PFAs and portfolio investors to increase investment in stock market. That story is in greater detail on page 25. Now, Al-Majiri represents hunger and poverty, not Islam. That's attributed to the Sultan. Al-Majiri represents hunger and poverty, not Islam. That's according to the Sultan, and the story can be found in greater detail on page 6. Now, also there on the front page, we have the story of Sanusi II, that's the Emir of Kano, meets Kano Assembly today. That's, of course, the story jumps to page 5. Listen.
All right. For the Daily Trust, I'll start off with that. You'll find this stories. Just below the nameplate for the Daily Trust, you have President say, no decision yet on Babachi and Babachi Lawal, of course, Secretary to the Government of the Federation, and Ayoke is a DG NIA. 10,000 caught cheating in UTME exams. This is coming from JAM. That's what you find on page 5. Leading for the Daily Trust, federal government, states, local governments shared 1.4 trillion naira in first quarter. That story starts right there and continues on page 5. And you also have a graphic representation of the sharing formula. Just below the graphic representation there you find the stories. How ransomware attack exposed online records vulnerability. That story is on page 15. Lamido to Badaru, your intimidation won't stop the fate. Kaduna State government orders probe of rifles found in wrecked car. That story is on page 6.
Listen, just before we bring in Omine, the story you read about the suspended Secretary to the Government of the Federation as well as DGNI, it's also reported on the front page of This Day newspaper above the name flag of This Day. And the headline is somewhat different from that of Daily Trust, but it said presidency, that's the kicker. Lawal, that's Babachi Lawal, suspended SGF, and then suspension remains indefinite. So Lawal suspension remains indefinite. That's attributed to the presidency. The story starts on the front page and then continues on page 10. 1 minute.
Well, starting with, let me start with the story on the CGN. The Chief Justice of Nigeria has reinforced an appeal to Nigerians, particularly politicians, and indeed the media organs, to be wary on the manner in which they put out sweeping statements or allegations against judicial officers, mostly judges. He has said that whatever grievances, allegations, whether against corruption or unethical behavior, unprofessional behavior by judges or judicial officers across the tiers of government, there's due process to follow, which is the NJC, the National Judicial Council. Any allegation you have, in as much as the judiciary is there to ensure that the voice of the voiceless is heard in Nigeria, is not a license for people to just be making sweeping statements. That his press secretary said it's a warning, but he yesterday at the Thanksgiving emphasized and said it's a threat to the judiciary, that doing this amounts to discouraging even the officers who are working, because in all this, not everybody is not saying that they are completely all corrupt, but there are some persons who are good. So when you make sweeping statements, you are smearing the image of the judiciary. But he has assured that the judiciary remains forthright and will ensure that the proper things are done. But people should channel their complaints, allegations of unethical behavior, corruption to the National Judicial Council. That is the agency mandated by law to ensure that the right things are done and people who are culpable are taken to book.
No, that story about the judiciary being under threat, it's on the front page of the Authority, just at the foot of the page.
All over the papers, you have a breakdown of the sharing formula between the state, local governments, and the federal government for the first quarter. As one of the papers talking about the fact that the governor of Gombe State is being accused of making sweeping statements against local government. He says the local governments do not have capacity. But Norge is saying that they have capacity, but that the governors are not allowing the local governments to function the way they should function as enshrined in the law. That if they are given the opportunity to function properly, they will function. But as it is now, the functions of the local government are usurped by the states. So how will they function?
Well, let's take a look. There's one of the stories you just discussed, that of the judiciary being under threat by, according to the CJN, it's on page 10 of the New Telegraph. But let's begin with this headline above the nameplate of the New Telegraph. States pay 89.1 billion naira liabilities in 3 months. With rider, federal government, states, local governments withdraw 1.41 trillion naira from federation account. And then below the nameplate, you have a window of 3 other headlines. Wike thanks God for successful second year in office. Details of that story can be found on page 31. Of course, it's only 7 days away to the second anniversary. That treat gunshot victims. IG urges doctors. This has been a controversial issue for decades now. Details of the story can be found on page 33. Now, there's a boardroom squabble here. Board bickers as Julius Berger fires 600. Board bickers as Julius Berger fires 600. The story can be found on page 8. Now, the lead story has a kicker, Parry Club reformed. APC leaders have hijacked EFCC, and that's attributed to Yari. Yari, of course, is the governor of Zamfara and also chairman of the Governors Forum. It says, NGF chair accuses party leaders of dirty fight over poll, and anti-graft agency, we are not prodded by any forces. That story is in greater detail on page 2 of the New Telegraph. But by the way, it's also the lead story for This Day newspaper. This Day leads with it and says, Paris London Club reform, that's the kicker, aggrieved APC chieftains targeting Buhari, says Yari. And with a rider insists he was misquoted on meningitis outbreak, and 300 have died from the disease in Zamfara. Of course, the report initially was that he said that the meningitis was punishment from God as a result of sin. Now, back again, Blessing, to the New Telegraph. Maybe check on 1 or 2 other headlines from that.
Let's take quick. Some of the ones atop the nameplates we have already looked into, the sharing formula. But let's take a look at the lead for the Authority. Rail projects. Southeast, South-South lines should be funded from a $5.8 billion loan. This is coming from Senator Abaribe. As the rider to that, rejects federal government's concessionaire option.
All right, Omide, let's maybe come back to you.
I want to take on Authority now. Is that a still news, or is it still news, or they are just trying to emphasize the news? This was trended and made the rounds last week when Senate talked about the plan by the transportation sector on what they plan for the rail. So that to me is not news as fresh, maybe for emphasis sake or follow-ups. And I think within the week we are going to have a potpourri of activities inching towards the second year anniversary of the President's administration at the federal and the state level. And at the national level, the Vice President is billed to, one of the major activities is to have an interactive session with the middle level cadre of the public and civil service to emphasize on the enormity of the executive orders he signed. And his explanation will be hinged around the business environment and the promotion of made in Nigerian goods. it's going to be very, very interactive.
All right, well, that is very quickly, Omini, once again, this is the second lead story on the front page of New Telegraph, and it's at the foot of the paper, just below the photograph there. It says, PDP crisis, that's the kicker. Sheriff and McCarthy fight over Supreme Court case, and Apex Court reschedules hearing for today. Details of that story can be found on page 5. And diet pills supplement dangerous to teenage health. And then to return to this day newspaper, 2 other headlines there. One above the nameplate says federal government and private firms to sign MOU on repair of Wharf Road. Apapa, of course, that road is virtually collapsed now. Details of that story can be found on page 65. Now, CBN signals retention of tight monetary policy and targets rate convergence. And banking industry fines dropped by 79%. So those are the headlines from the front pages that we're checking. Blessing, do you have any other headlines?
None for now.
All right. So yeah, that's the most that we can take. So we'd like to thank you for being here today. All right.
Insightful celebration.
Okay, so that does it for this paper review segment. We'll take a short break now. When we return, do not forget we have 2 issues to discuss. We have the spokesman of the Ministry of Defense, of Defense Headquarters here with us, as well as the National Transport Commission bill.
Hear the call of change. Stand up, Nigeria. Change is here and it's going to stay. Change begins with you. Oh yeah, make we go. So let the change begin from within. Look at your eye, oh get roller. Change begins with you and me. Oh, change begins with me. Oh, change begins with me. Oh, change begins with me.
Coca-Cola?
Oh, it's happy hour. So, you want a free Coca-Cola, but you have to drink it here.
It is with joy that I've received Our Excellency's gifts.
I want to say that may God continue to bless and reward her. And so, on behalf of Garki Hospital, we are grateful.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria now. To start the first part of our discussion, which is taking a look at the report from Transparency International against the Nigerian military. Recently, Transparency International released a report in which it accused the Nigerian military of benefiting from the fight against Boko Haram insurgency in many ways. However, the military were quick to dismiss the allegation. Well, joining us in the studio to discuss Nigerian military and the Transparency International is Major General John Eneche. He's the Director of Defense Information. Thank you for joining us on the program today.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, let's take a look at this report released by Transparency International. The military was quick to actually dismiss the allegation. What exactly were your own differences in actually saying this is not true?
Yes. That particular report, a 19-page document, they claim it was a research they did. because I actually had to speak with one of them, the Nigerian lead man, Salahuddin. A report of 5 years, from when to when, based on your research you did. And he said 5 years, up till 2014. I looked at the executive summary. The document is here. Executive summary did not capture exactly what was in the report. I looked at what was released to the press and to the whole world, completely different from what is in the report of their so-called research, what they are supposed to put as an executive summary that should be disseminated to Transparency International London, and what is supposed to be released to the public. Press release completely different. So immediately I saw that, I suspected that there was a foul play and that something is wrong along the line. Again, I analyzed the report from the strategic point of view, operational point of view. I did a matrix tactically, and then the target audiences which this report was meant for. And all that it pointed to from the matrix is not more than the fact that there is a fifth columnist working, probably without the knowledge of Transparency International, for selfish reasons, which is meant to undermine all our activities. Now, a report that did not reflect or capture the present military officials, and you are saying military officials, by implication, from Ministry of Defense, Defense Headquarters, Army, Navy and the Air Force Headquarters, including those in the field. Of course, in the military, I want people to understand that leadership starts from the platoon level. That is the real leadership, where you have officers. Then you have soldiers at the section level. That means all military officials are corrupt. And then you wait against the time for which this report is coming, when we are recording successes. What was it meant to achieve? Again, when we are now gaining all the support back from where we lost them, like with the United States of America, and trying to consolidate on our support and cooperation with France, United Kingdom, Germany, amongst others, Israel. Why won't you suspect that something went wrong? So that is what is wrong with the report. A report that did not reflect what you said you did in the field. And again, you look at it, they say research. What is research? What methodology did you use? I did not see any methodology in that research at all. And all the names that they were acknowledged there, with all sense of apology to them, are supposed to be, I assume, academicians. What went wrong? Academic research at polytechnic or diploma level, degree level, master's level. Of course, unfortunately for them, I went through all these stages. Military, continuous military education will teach you all this. So it is not strange. So I don't know. And that was why we had to respond in that way. Are you saying that the President Honorable Minister of Defense, military official, Chief of Defense Staff, Chief of Army Staff, Chief of the Naval Staff, Chief of the Air Staff, Theater Commander, Operation Lafia Adole, all of them, through military officials, are all corrupt? What they wanted to do was to truncate the successes we are recording. And that was why we needed to respond. But I want to announce to people that I have gone through the report. Tell the people, tell the general public that it is not a true reflection of the kangaroo research that was conducted. And that was why I responded in that way.
General Eneche, can we have the benefit of the dissonance in the presentation of the reports? Because you say that, look, the executive summary is in tension with or in conflict with the main report, and that even the main report itself contains all kinds of inconsistencies, and that you quarrel with the research methodology as well as their findings. You have one or two examples of
I have it here.
Yeah, yes.
Look at the report. I have it on my, and that is why I have to copy with it here. Let me summarize it, and any person, if you want, you can access it online from pages 1 to the last page.
That's right.
Was there any mention of 2015 here? No, sir. Nothing.
So what years specifically?
They covered up to 2014.
Starting from when?
That is why I say there was no methodology. I don't want to disgrace this research report openly. Anywhere you do research, you have scope. No scope. In this content, in this introduction, nothing. This is blank report. And I suspect that it must have been done with ulterior motive on both sides. And Transparency International will also have to be careful in people that they task. Because in all fairness to Transparency International, I didn't see any name reflective of somebody from outside the country that did this thing. We have to be careful. So that is why I'm contesting it. No methodology here. What did you use? No population. I, as a director of defense information, they didn't come to say, look for this material. Where is the sample? They did not sample army. They did not sample. They claim they visited army headquarters. And they visited, that is the Nigerian organization fronting for them, on a different thing altogether. Not about what? Amnesty International report. No methodology. Then executive summary did not capture the introduction succinctly as it is taught up to recommendations. No. They now came with their recommendations, which is something that covered the period not mentioned, no scope. Then look at what was released.
The press statement.
The press statement that was released from London, 18th of May. And there was embargo on it up till early hours of Thursday. Keep it secret so that they can achieve surprise. So that probably there will be problem within us. My subordinates will begin to rise up against us. But thank God that we got it before then, and we reacted.
General,
yes.
I mean, you used a strong expression. You said there are probably fifth columnists who are at work. And if there are fifth columnists, we know the laws of the land. Are the laws in abeyance in this case, or the
no, it's not in abeyance. I'm not in a position to talk about that, but I have just brought out my observation. And because I am a strategist, operational analyst, and I did the matrix, and that is what it gave me. When you put all together, as a military man, you do your analysis, you do your estimate, you do your appreciation, and you now say, what is it? Before you make...
Okay, General, while not undermining what the military has done in recent years, the strongest point for the allegation was on corruption, and which is said to be weakening whatever efforts the country is making to battle Boko Haram. Now, allegation of misappropriation of funds meant to equip the military. But really, how does it tally up with what we're seeing? Some aspects of soldiers taking on militants without ammunition. How true are those?
Completely wrong, not true. Not in this present administration. When this present leadership came on board, July 2015, up till now, nothing like that. Permit me, I will not talk in retrospect. Can't talk about the past. But now, I tell you that the present leadership, under the able leadership of the Chief of Defense Staff, Army Staff, Navy Staff, and the Air Staff, the troops' morale have been seriously enhanced. Equipment procurement is not even hidden, it's not secret. We are all seeing it. Provision of everything that, to a large extent, that we require in the fronts. And that is why our morals are high. You talk about procurement. Established at all levels of the armed forces now. We have branches established from defense headquarters right to the Air Force headquarters. And we follow Bureau for Public Procurement procedure, following all the thresholds. I am very, very confident about this, what I'm telling you, that can be proved. So how does it apply?
Well, is there a sense in which probably, again, is there a sense in which it's a historical account? Because if they say the period ends in 2014, as you have already said, the scope of work is not indicated, or scope of research is not indicated, methodology is not indicated. But if this relates to what happened in the past, which you are not comfortable to discuss, part of the evidence that has also come to the public domain, could there be any further ground, therefore, for disparaging the report?
Well, I can't say beyond the suspicion, like I earlier said on, that somebody is being pranky. Somebody is playing a game on both sides. Okay. With Transparency International, and maybe from another angle.
How frustrating is this?
Well, it would have been frustrating if their aim was achieved. But that was the target. That was their aim, to frustrate our effort, to undermine our effort.
All right, General, another issue that, of course, we cannot but also touch on was a statement made, the caution issued by the Chief of Army Staff to soldiers, let's say, members, of course, of the armed forces, speaking specifically of the Army, that they should be wary of the dangers of being canvassed by certain political elements. And we all know what all of this means for those, who have been old enough to have witnessed, interventions by the military in the past. This would appear to be a prelude. Exactly what is happening in the armed forces with regard to, assuming there is any, attempts by persons to canvass support for illegitimate regime change.
Specifically, what I would tell you here is that it is the command responsibility of the Chief of Army Staff and all service chiefs to do what he is doing or to say what he said. Command responsibility in the sense that from time to time it's a routine thing to caution, but whereby there is need to bring in such caution earlier or at times not in line with the routine, it is done. Look at it. There is, of course, you know that the military is about the most monitored institution or profession with all sense of maybe flexibility in the whole world. Your movement in and out, you go to the mess, you come to the barracks, you are timed, you are supposed to do all this. And even people that visit you or you visit are supposed to be, monitored to some extent because of all this. It's not only in Nigeria, all over the whole place. And whereby you notice a difference in any of the parties, either the visitors or your soldiers going out, whatever, there is need for caution. Then you begin to probe it. You begin to investigate it. That's what all it's all about. But I want to assure you that the complete loyalty of the Chief of the Army Staff right to the last commander is still 100% and absolute. And that is it. But we do this, like I told you, it's a command responsibility. And of course, in the course of carrying out your command responsibility, if there is any deviation from the ethics, from what you are supposed to do, you will be checked. And the checks comes in various ways. You'll be cautioned, you could be charged, you could be tried, and we are all aware of that.
Any arrests yet?
For now, I cannot confirm that to you.
But investigations are going on.
All right, General,
investigation is a standard thing.
Yeah, General, just before we let you go, just one last point. Look, my colleague asked the question, whether the armed forces are rattled by the report by Transparency International. There would appear to be a consistent pattern. Transparency is reported there at some point in the past it was Amnesty talking about human rights abuses. We do not know which other organization, international or local, might then come up with its own report. What do you make of all of this, consistent?
What I make up is that, in all fairness, at my level, I've gone through the mill about 31 years, studied and then, work with international organizations in the UN. What is going on is that I will advise the international organizations, the international, let them take a look at the people they use in Nigeria. Let them take a serious look at them. They will not be getting value for their investment. I know the history of Transparency International that started from the UK. A gentleman lawyer who wanted good to be transparent, but look at what we are seeing. And in all fairness, it is not they from UK that are here in London or from the Amnesty International, but Nigerians. Let them take a second look at those people that they are using. They may frustrate them and truncate their effort and their objectives. That is what I see in the whole thing. Because for us now, for me to say totally that Amnesty International, whatever, no. The real Amnesty International and Transparency International are not here. Okay. It is our people that they are using.
All right, Director of Defense Information, Major General John Enechen. Thank you very much for joining us on the program this morning.
Thank you.
Okay, it's Good Morning Nigeria. After this break, we'll go over to our second issue, which is taking a look at the National Transport Commission Bill.
Admission forms for the 2017-2018 academic session of NTA Television College JAWS into its diploma programs are now on sale. The diploma programs are in film and TV production, broadcast journalism, and TV engineering technology. Applicants are required to have at least 5 credits, including English language and mathematics at SSC, NECO, or GCO levels in not more than 1 sitting. Application forms can be obtained from the TV College Refi JAWS or at any NTA zonal centers nationwide on payment of a non-refundable fee of 7,500 naira in bank draft in favor of NTA Television College. Completed application forms should be returned to the office of the academic secretary, NTA Television College, or the center of purchase on or before 28th of July 2017. For further inquiries, please call 0806 980 9807 or 0703 660 7155. NTA Television College, training you to be the best you can be.
TV Guide magazine is out with fabulous Fab Funke Akindele Bello, aka Jennifer, adorning the cover. She opens a secret not known even to her family. Find out the secret. NTA turns 40 this year. The challenges, the emerging trends in broadcasting, and the way forward. Weekend Dealer 2. Meet the team behind the biggest deal on NTA. Is food still the way to a man's heart? If not, what else? This edition is hot and juicy. Meet your star faces on screen. Entertainment, fashion, young minds, social media, and great personality.
This is idiosyncratic and heterodox.
Yes, Professor John Bull is on the radar. Find out what makes this program the rave of the moment on NTA Network. And for the prof,
over and out.
TV Guide. Ask your vendors or book your copy at every NTA station nationwide. TV Guide, still your indispensable companion.
All right, welcome back. But if you just joined us, it's Good Morning Nigeria. We are reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. As we indicated, we have 2 topics for discussion this morning. A moment ago, we signed off the Director of Defense the Director of Defense Information, General John Enenche. Now we have guests joining us to take on our second issue, which has to do, of course, with attempts aimed at reforming the transport sector by way of legislation. Now we join our correspondent, Uyemi Ajayi, for the background report as a prompt for our discussion this morning.
Transportation plays a significant role in the social and economic development of any country, either developed or developing, and it is regarded as the most important catalyst for development. This is definitely encouraged by an articulated transport policy in that country. Perhaps this necessitated the desire of the federal government to have a sound transport policy that will turn around the sector for the better. It is in line with this that the National Assembly is promulgating the National Transport Commission Bill, a bill that is included in the legislative agenda of the 8th National Assembly. Perhaps the importance attached to this bill might not be unconnected with the delay it has suffered over the years. Just recently, the Nigerian House of Representatives passed the bill for an act to establish the National Transport Commission, NTC, as an independent multimodal transport sector regulator. The bill is to, among other purposes, establish the National Transport Commission as an effective, impartial and independent regulatory authority in the transport sector and to set out the objectives, functions and powers of the Commission. It is also to promote the implementation of the National Transport Policy. It is to provide an economic regulatory framework for the transport sector or regulated transport industry. It is to provide mechanism for monitoring compliance of government agencies and transport operators in the regulated transport industry with relevant legislation and advise government on matters relating to economic regulation or regulated transport industry. It is to protect the rights and interests of service operators and users within Nigeria and create an enabling environment for private sector participation in the provision of services in the transport sector. As much as the bill is now up for concurrence in the Senate, one can only hope for a better transportation system in Nigeria.
All right, thank you very much, Emi Ajayi, for that background report. Now we have three guests with us here in the studios for further deliberation on this issue. First, we'd like to welcome Mr. Roland Ataguba. He's Chief Executive of Bethlehem Rail, and he's also superintends the Technical Advisory Committee of the House of Representatives Committee on the Rail Bill, as well as the National Transport Commission Bill. Mr. Ataguba, pleasure to have you join us on the program this morning.
Good morning.
All right, and then we also have with us here in the studios Dr. Patrick Asadu, who is chairman of the House Committee on Ports, Harbours and Waterways. Honorable Asadu, a pleasure to have you on the program.
You're welcome, dear.
Okay. And last but not the least is Mr. Khalid, a senior partner of Infrastructure Delivery International. Mr. Khalid, I'm delighted to have you on the program this morning.
Thank you.
All right. Listen.
Okay, let's start off with the chair House Committee on the Rail Bill and National Transport Commission Bill. Now, what exactly is this bill seeking to address, Dr. Patrick Asadu?
Yeah, the bill essentially aims at bringing sanity to a sector that had been run as winner takes all, everything for every other person except the government and the people, and also the investors. What we have is just like in other sectors that were unregulated, like the communication, that everybody was doing whatever he wanted. And Nigeria has lost big for it. I chair the House Committee on Port and other agencies, and I can assure you that it's only Nigeria that we have gone into a concessioning agreement where we sign off our ports to investors without an entity, without a regulator, without anybody saying, you, the owner of the port, this is the limit of your powers, this is the limit of your expectation. To the investor, this is how we protect your investment. So this is also a commitment to the Nigerian government, and this is what you must do. And to the shipper, what we call shippers are the cargo owners, the users, that these are your rights, these are your privileges, this is where your rights stops and is. And then, because Nigeria has been, like other parts of the world, trying to promote the multimodal. Multimodal means we want to integrate all other forms of transportation, from the water to the rail to the air to the land, that's roads. We decided that what Nigeria needs is an agency, is a strong, well-organized, well-manned agency that regulates who does what, from the agency point, from the service provider point, from the service user point, for the benefit of not just government, but all Nigerians. That's what the NTC bill is trying to do, to regulate our transport system. And I'm proud, I'm happy that it is in this 8th assembly that this bill has been able to pass. Of course, it has been trending for some time, but because the major stakeholders never seem to agree, this is a big money industry, and the stakeholders hardly ever agree on anything. So I think that no law is perfect. What we've done, there are going to be challenges, there are going to be observations, but we start and we leave room for amendment because we are not God. But what we've done is huge for Nigeria. What we've done is what should have been done before 2005-2006 concessioning. That not being in place, to me, was unforgivable.
All right, well, Honorable Asadu, when you pick holes, as it were, in the concessioning arrangements that occurred a decade or more ago, some persons will also argue that the issues you raise ordinarily will be embedded in the terms of the concession, in terms of the obligations of the concessionaires and others. So are you seeking now to shift the goalposts? Are you seeking to alarm those who are already into this contract of concessioning?
No, we are not at all. As a matter of fact, one of the things that you notice in that agreement and in other agreements is that there will be the government side, there will be the service provider side. Who is the shipper side? Who is the cargo owner? Who was there for the cargo owner when that bill was, those agreements were reached? More importantly, we are saying that even the port owner, the NPA, needs to be regulated. They cannot just wake up one day and say, we signed this agreement, it's no more convenient for us. So I will not condemning the agreement as we are condemning the system. And there was a consultancy done by Royal Haskoning that said, you cannot concession your port without anybody saying that this is the limit of the rights of each of the parties to this agreement. And I just use the port system as one of the examples of where not having a regulator has undermined Nigeria. Of course, without concessioning, maybe our ports would have all disappeared entirely. But what we are saying is that we could have done much more and could have protected Nigeria much more, and also invited foreign capital, because an investor that is investing without regulation is like asking me to come to NTA, knowing that NTA can shift the time from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. and I cannot complain. And if I complain, what can I do to MP? So it's not just for the government, it's not just for the individual investors, but it was to provide a legal and institutional protection for all the parties to the agreement. So the agreements were okay, but we needed to put the horse before the cart and not the other way around. And that's what we did. And that's not only there. And of course, when we talk about the other modes of transport that are captured in NTC, you understand that it's not just about the port system, but it shows you how sometimes not making a simple arrangement, the price of, if you know how much you've lost in billions of, because people sign in and say we're going to put hundreds of millions of dollars, and as soon as you sign it, discover the person has no money. So what do? You have already signed an agreement. But there was supposed to be a regulator who will say, you signed this, and because you're not meeting it, it's not between you and who you sign for. You know how easy it is to get to judgment. There are a lot of litigations that have arisen, so have so many things. But we are not there to discuss the constitutional agreements today. We are discussing the NTC, and to me it's a fantastic deal.
All right, thanks. Well, but what is the status of the bill now in the National Assembly? Of course, you have two chambers.
Yeah, the House has passed. Of course, the usual thing is to send to the Senate to concur. But we also notice that the Senate has advanced a version of the NTC bill. And we are not at all worried about it, because that is why there are two chambers. If they pass something that's different from our own, then we're going to sit down in conference. And what I show Nigerians is that the primary drive for this is that we must get our transport sector right. Because if we get it right, I can assure you that we will unlock something that Nigerians will. Of course, communication is a small thing compared to transportation. So we'll sit down, the House is ready, the Senate will soon pass their own, I have assurance on that, and then we'll conference. And again, because it has stranded for so long, and we know that if we don't get this bill signed, as soon as political activities rev up, nobody will be listening to bills. So there are bills that have been kind of jinxed in the House. The NTC is one of the ones we want signed before we go to the political field.
All right, Honorable Sadu.
When are they going to the political field anyway? It's only 2 years.
Very soon, Kingsley.
That's right.
Okay, before we bring in Mr. Khalid Singh, now, Mr. Roland Tagoba, of course, this bill, as he has itemized, is seeking to do so many things. You on the Technical Advisory Committee taking a look at this bill. What essentially will be different from the different aspects of regulations that the other ports or the other parts of the transport system have actually had in the time past? What difference will it make?
Well, one of the fundamental, and thank you for your question, one of the fundamental shifts in the institution of the NTC is that we're bringing all the modes of transportation under one hat, under the NTC. That is roads, rail, aviation, and maritime.
Is aviation coming under this too?
Yes, aviation is under the NTC. It's one of the modifications that was done in the review. It indeed was one of the shortcomings of the bill that passed second reading, which was that aviation had been excluded, as well as safety regulation. And so what we have now under the NTC is an independent multi-sector regulator that covers economic and safety regulation.
Okay, if for the present government do change, but now we have aviation separate, and we know international regulations, of course, cover for different aspects. Now, maybe, while you ruminate on that, let's go over to Mr. Khalid Singh. What do you make of this commission? That is a commission bill for transport.
Well, thank you very much for the question. Thanks very much for inviting me here. But I think I'd like to go back a bit in history to what the Honourable Chairman was talking about. In 2005, whilst I was a consultant to the Bureau of Public Enterprises, when we were fast-tracking the concession of the ports, I was asked to really look at the ports law and try and find out how we can concession the ports within the existing legislation, because we knew that obviously the way how the National Assembly works, it certainly does take some time. before legislation was passed. And then we identified certain clauses within the NPA Act that allowed the NPA to grant what we classify as long-term leases. Yeah. So therefore, we went ahead with a concession, and at the same time, we drafted a bill, the Ports Bill, as far back as that, and that's why I like to commend this 8th National Assembly, who were extremely proactive. So we drafted a Ports Bill, and within that Ports Bill, we developed a framework for what we classify as interport competition, whereby we created Nigerian Western and Nigerian Eastern ports. Okay. Why did we do that? Yeah, a substantial amount of Nigerian cargo gets diverted to Republic of Benin.
Exactly.
Right? So you get ports in Calabar, you get ports in Warri, you get ports in also Port Harcourt that are completely underutilized. What I found strange was that importers will bring cargo into Lagos and drive it by truck on the dreaded Lagos-Benin road, destroying that road to get it all the way down to Aba. So what we had to do was to create interport competition to allow the ports to compete with each other, so the Nigerian eastern ports can now come up with certain tariffs and levies that will attract international shipping and take away our cargo that's going to our neighboring countries. Unfortunately, that National Assembly did not pass that bill, and the bill died a natural death. Okay? Shortly after that, I was responsible for the concession of the rail, also at the BPA. And at that time, when we looked at the ports concession, we realized if we created a regulator for ports and went on to create a separate regulator for rail, we'll have several regulators for each subsector. Then we realized that no, Nigeria doesn't have the funding, Nigeria doesn't have the capacity, that it's best to review what global best practice was doing at the time. And we found out that developing countries like ourselves, Tanzania and a few others, who are going through tremendous reform, realized that the multi-sector regulator was the best thing forward. And the way they did it was to house everything in one agency, but rely on subsector legislation.
Okay. To
drive that particular sector. That's why there isn't much controversy with aviation, because aviation can fit under the hat of the NTC. They will still rely on their subsector legislation, yeah, which is bound by international conventions. So we obviously clearly don't breach any international conventions. But what we do, we share the pool of expertise that exists, or rather scarce pool of expertise that exists in terms of economists, in terms of lawyers, in terms of accountants, who assess all of these regulatory issues. Then we have a few technical, because you certainly do need that, in relation to safety for each subsector. So that's what we've basically done. Unfortunately, in 2006, when we submitted that bill to the executive, it got changed, and before we knew it, we had an NTC bill that tried to draft all the provisions in one legislation, which obviously can't work. You cannot.
What do we have now? What do we have now?
So therefore, what we have was what I described initially. So I was invited to be a member of both the Senate and the House committees on the NTC bill and also the railway bill, and reintroduced the original bill that we drafted, which was more flexible, as I described. So that's what we have now, hopefully. I think that's what we have in the House.
All right. Just wait. Yeah, there are some.
In the Senate.
That's fine. There are some points that we need to clarify. There is in existence, in fact, the office is not far from Abuja headquarters studios, that's of the Nigerian Television Authority. It's called the Infrastructure Concession Regulatory Commission.
Yeah.
How will this NTC, by the way, is not Nigerian Tobacco Company that we used to have in the past. How will NTC function along with ICRC, or will ICRC now become moribund? That's one leg. That's one leg of my question. I would like all three of you to take it.
Yeah.
Then you talk about ports. Let's use the ports, maritime transportation. There was a time in this country when stakeholders were complaining, and then you had the Cabotage Act. The Cabotage Act, first it was a bill, and then it became an act, it was passed, and then everybody was saying, yeah, this is the best that ever happened. A few years down the road, they say, no, everything is gone haywire. So, you also have the Shippers Council. What are these people, what are they all doing? First of all, ICRC, how will it work with NTC? Honorable Asado, before we come to Kalisin and then the other.
Yeah, well, you mentioned Infrastructure Regulatory Commission. Even from the name, apart from commission, one is talking about infrastructure generally. And we are talking here purely about the transport modes, especially something that will capture those things that have been missed in the past. There was a statement by my brother which wasn't what we met on ground, especially about the port system having its own independent regulator for the concession agreement. I think the port had always retained some form of technical and economic NPA, which was wrong because they were now being regulated to something they were party to. Now, the government eventually noticed in between that there was a need for an economic regulator, and because there was no commission handy, they designated the Shippers Council as interim economic regulator. That was under the former government. But coming to the difference between the ICRC and the NTC is like asking what's the difference between ICRC and NCC and the other commissions. And what I'm saying is that we are not taking anything away from the Infrastructure Regulatory Commission. What we are doing is to address a sector that potentially is bigger than the petroleum sector, but that has maybe what you said, what are they all doing? You may not notice it also sitting here, but there are a lot of things they are doing. We want to do those things in an organized and cohesive manner and make sure that we get maximum profit from our own resources. The second question was on what?
Well, as I said, I mean, you've made your opinion, you've expressed your opinion with regard to what you think the ICRC should do. Infrastructure, I mean, rail is infrastructure. Road is infrastructure. The ports were also said to be infrastructure. Well, let's get the views now of...
The ICRC is a concessioning regulatory authority. It regulates the relationship between a concessionaire and the concessionee or the grantor of the concession. That is a very, very different relationship from that of a regulator of a service provision. The NTC regulates tariffs. It regulates the economic conditions under which an industry provides services to the public. The ICRC is a totally different regulator, but there are interfaces and there are synergies as a result. Now, you've also mentioned issues such as the Shippers Council regulating the maritime sector. It's an economic regulator in the maritime sector. What's going to happen with the NTC is agencies such as the Shippers Council will collapse into the NTC. Federal Road Safety will collapse into the NTC. Which other one? The Civil Aviation Authority will collapse into the NTC. So we would have fewer agencies. At the moment, you've got about 15 different MDAs who are providing various regulatory authorities in transportation. And you have a lot of overlaps. You also have a lot of gaps, even then still. And what is going to happen is all of these regulatory powers will be giving up by these MDAs to the NTC. So you would have a one-stop shop in terms of regulation for the entire transportation sector. It creates coherence. It means you can plan. It also means that government has just one agency to which it can take regulatory advisory from. And so I think it's all positive. It's a win-win.
All right, Mr. Tagoba, sorry, Kingsley, in the time past, of course, the same Shippers Council at a point in the past administration given power to actually regulate the same industry. But there were some agitations here and there, almost to their wits' ends with some of the other agencies related. So how come we're still having them to now supersede what is going to be happening in NTC now, and what difference will they make with other?
Well, the Shippers Council is coming into the NTC to regulate maritime. It's still going to continue doing what it is doing now.
Okay.
It is not going to regulate railway, for instance, because it hasn't got the capacity, nor does it have the competence. In fact, it needs to build capacity in safety regulation of the maritime sector, because it will be coming under that hat. Now, I don't see any confusion in this. I see more coherence. I see more order. And therefore, I see better protection for investors and clarity in terms of the way we conduct business going forward.
Well, Mr. Khalidson, Mr. Atagoba says he doesn't see, he sees coherence. I see conflict. I see a potential conflict. Take it from the point of view that specialization oftentimes is the basis for driving efficiency, and efficiency considerations are also the basis for increased specialization. Let's take NCAA, for instance, Civil Aviation Authority. You know the crisis that the aviation subsector has faced. On this program, we've had aviation experts who have also complained seriously about what goes on in the NCCA and this relationship with stakeholders. Now you are saying NCAA will come under one omnibus concession, one omnibus transport commission. Port will come under it. Road FRSC will come under it. Rail will come under it. What are we creating some giant? I don't know.
I think there is no cause for alarm. What we're trying to do is to really bring sanity to the sector. Okay. Now, what I've actually tried to explain, and it's really important we stay focused on this, is the importance of subsector legislation. Yeah. So even though they come under it, they're still bound by subsector legislation, right? Now, in terms of the issues in the aviation sector, like NCAA, I think that those are issues that will be resolved as time goes by within a more efficient NTC. However, with regards to the Shippers Council, I think it's best we are careful in this arena, because Shippers Council was not set up to be a regulator. The Shippers Council's legislation does not empower it to actually regulate a particular sector. We've looked at that very, very carefully. And we've identified that, yes, there are certain individuals within the Shippers Council who may have economic regulatory experience. But rather than subsume and illegality into a legal structure, we're saying let the executive deal with that. Then let us talk about Shippers Council for now. Let us establish the NTC from a legal standpoint, and let the executive determine which staff from the Shippers Council it wants to bring in. But you cannot legislate for a Shippers Council who didn't have the mandate in the first place to move into that particular space. So I think we have to be very, very careful with that. So at the end of the day, what we are preventing is really what we don't have. Nigeria's recurrent expenditure, correct me if I'm wrong, is hitting towards 80%. Yeah. So by creating all these agencies, we're now increasing our recurrent expenditure.
Recurrent is clamped down. It's not over 80%.
What is it now?
What, 70?
It's about 70. Yes, that's the capex has moved up.
Okay, yeah. So therefore, we need to drive that down even more. And the only way we can drive that down even more is to harmonize these agencies. If not, you have 5 regulatory bodies dotted around Abuja, needing an office, needing staff. These are all very expensive things that Nigeria, I'm sorry, definitely cannot afford. Now, going back to the ICRC, just to clarify on that, there are certain obligations that the government has in a concession agreement, and there are certain obligations that the concessionaire has. What the ICRC does is that when a concession agreement is signed, the ICRC monitors that agreement to ensure that those obligations are met. So it's completely different from actually regulating things like tariff and anti-competitive behavior, like what the NCC and what NERC does. So it's important that we make a distinction between the two.
Will an anti-competition law not take care of issues related?
That is quite dangerous, because competition law does not apply to regulated sectors. Why do I say that? Because a regulated sector is a sector that really carefully examines the port of entry. For example, in the railways, you can't expect every single individual who wants to operate a railway to get onto the railway line, but you can allow any soft drinks manufacturer to enter the space. So the way you regulate anti-competitive behavior in the soft drinks market is completely different from the way you regulate competitive behavior in the aviation, in the ports, because there are limited amount of players within that space. So therefore, competition law doesn't apply to this particular area.
I'm sorry to interject, and I'll bring in Asadu just in a moment. Look, let's clarify this. you say that the pre-existing agencies will retain their original enabling legislation. For instance, NCA will retain its, that's in the aviation sector, so they will still operate under their laws. So what then is the utility of this NTC as an umbrella commission? So if each of them, if regard them as silos, if you like, aviation already has this. Rail already has this. And by the way, I mean, we're talking about reforming the rail sector. There are all kinds of pieces of legislation that you say, look, break it down, remove it from the exclusive list so that you can have private sector, coming state governments and local governments, X, Y, Z. So if they already have their pieces of legislation, why do you need some other grandfather?
Sorry. The idea is that within the ports bill that we're going for the public hearing now, the railway bill, the inland waterways bill, and the roads bill, all bills are going under review. Right. All bills are establishing regulators. Yeah? So with each bill that is establishing a regulator, that regulator sits within the NTC. NCAA already has its own regulator that is a regulator that stands on its own. So these other bills are creating regulatory agencies. So in anticipation of these regulatory agencies coming into this space, we're housing them under one building. That's all what we're doing.
No, okay, sorry. When you say
those existing regulatory legislation will be repealed.
Yes.
The Shippers Council Act will be repealed upon the passage of the NTC. So the Shippers Council will move into the NTC. And there's a transitory period of, we recommended 5 years. I don't know what the House would do or has done in its wisdom. But a transition of 5 years, and some of these bills will get repealed in a phased manner. Because if you're thinking of migrating regulatory resources from 15 agencies to the NTC, you've got to do it in an orderly fashion, and that is why we've got this transition. As far as Mr. Carlton's reference to the Shippers Council's performance of economic regulation in maritime as an illegality, it is certainly a reckless statement to make because, number one, it is a law that granted Shippers Council the authority to conduct economic regulation in maritime.
Yes, I was just going to, because we've talked here and there about Shippers Council's role not being a main regulation in the first instance, but now the argument over just in the public space is that they want the Shippers Council now to transmute into the NTC as a main regulation. Why is there so much problem with that?
Can I explain what we passed? Can I explain what we passed?
Okay.
What we passed and what we hope to achieve does not create room for all this territorial struggle about whether it's Shippers Council or Miners Council. What we took the Shippers Council to be, and one, I must emphasize that the economic regulation done by Shippers Council had a law, but not a law passed by the National Assembly. It was a proclamation by the president, just like the acting president has done some proclamations giving powers. No, those laws are coming from the villa, but they're also very not as robust as a law.
That's called subsidiary legislation.
So, that's why I think he may have felt it was illegal. There was a proclamation based upon which they become economic regulators. But what we passed and what we hope to achieve with the NCC does not wipe out the Shippers Council at all. Shippers Council was supposed to be from day one an economic interest group, was supposed to be an interested party, is a participant in the port to the point that it protects the interest of shippers. A shipper is from American word, we ship goods, so those who own goods are called shippers. And the council that came together to protect, to say, these are big people, MPA is big, the ship owner is big, I don't have any protection. So they came together. They should have remained as that, as an economic interest group. And we believe they are going back to an economic interest group. Now, what you noticed as we studied the laws, took public hearings, read the reports of the technical committee which he chaired, was that amongst the agencies that already exist, here is one agency that had, whether by inferior or superior legislation, be given role to act as economic regulator. Two, here's an agency that government was supposed to fund because being self-interesting, it should have been more or less funded by shippers. But it has gotten enough resources from government to have some of the best offices across the land, in Lagos, in the zones and all that. Too. It had infrastructure, it had the spread, it had the manpower. It was being funded by government. And what we did wasn't to say transmute and wipe out so that you take over the NTC. No. Because if we did that, we have said that the executive secretary of NTC should become the head of NTC. I mean, the executive secretary of Shippers Council should have automatically become the head of NTC. And all the workers in Shippers Council must move to NTC. Another person will come in. And what was passed was a bill where the Shippers Council, those core assets, those core strengths that they have got, and then because they've done regulation, of course, they have more regulatory experience. Even if they were resisted, they were robustly resisted because not only were they operating from a subsidiary law, they were also operating against big industry fighters. Now, the difference with what we are doing is that, just like you were pointing out, today we are doing public hearing for today and tomorrow for 8 bills. What we do is, for the NTC, for the Railway Act that we are working on, we have invited all the stakeholders and the general public to come and tell us what you think should be incorporated into this law. So you cannot come to us and say, do you know when this law was passed? Today we are taking what you mentioned, the Port and Harbour Bill that should have been passed before concession. We are doing the public hearing today. The amendment of NEWA, where he was talking about containers moving from on the road, we thought that if a strong NEWA is in place, Dangote has no business putting his trucks on the road because a barge can take all of them to the... so what we are saying is that here we have made an NTC that first gives every agency an opportunity to bring the best of its regulatory experience to it. That's why he says there are regulators in MPA. Those regulators who are willing, who are competent, will move to NTC. And the appointment of the chief executive of the NTC is that of the executive. It's not something we have imposed.
All right. Well, Honorable Asadu, I'm just wondering, and Blessing, by the way, and then the other gentleman, the more you try to explain this, the more it appears to me that perhaps the legislature may need to tinker with the label. When you say Transport Commission, it gives the impression that you're also a player in the transport sector. Why not, for instance, assuming that that's okay, National Transport Regulatory Commission? But that's one point I'm suggesting. We have our viewers who have sent in their comments by way of tweets. We'll take those reactions now, and then we'll return to you guys to get your, return to you gentlemen to get your thoughts. Jeffrey Horagbo tweets, hope that the bill will not be a duplicate of the existing Ministry of Transport activities. Another extra load without strengthening the Ministry of Transportation.
Law Alpha C said lopsidedness and ethnic marginalization should be avoided in the implementation of the reform agenda as the bill will see the lights. All right,
Ume Chimieze tweets, well said, but more action, Honorable Pat Asadu.
Clifford Agogwesi, implementation of the imminent law is critical. The mindset of the implementers of the imminent law has to be attuned to a converged rather than siloed transport architecture.
And then we have this from Kubana Basi, tweet said the transport sector is key to national development, so political and personal interest or legislation issues should not tamper with it.
We will have this is from Umechimize, we will have the best transportation system when more railways are built, connecting all the regions, and it will ease off the road traffic.
And then Sunday Michael Amakoji, one of our regulars, by the way, says the reform should not just be a change of nomenclature, but it should give room to build more roads and railways. Now, Khalid, before we took the tweets a moment ago, you were itching to say something?
Yes. Thank you very much. I think I'll avoid some harsh words, but you know, it's important to realize that if you stick to legislation rather than whims, we can get to where we're going to, okay? Now, as the Honourable rightly said, the Shippers Council law establishes the Shippers Council to protect the interests of shippers, yeah? Nowhere in that legislation does it give it the power to regulate the ports. So if there is no provision in the Shippers Council's legislation that empowers it to legislate the ports, you can't have subsidiary legislation on a legislation that does not exist in the bill, in the law itself. So the subsidiary legislation has no reference to anything at all. Now, if we're talking law, I think the National Assembly, looking at the three arms of government, has the exclusive right to pass legislation. And any attempt by any agency within the three arms to try and pass legislation that is not based on subsidiary legislation, in my view, I think you can only have one conclusion. Honourable Smiley. So I think
let's not get into the jurisprudence of that. I mean, there are some persons who will tell you that
it's very important to understand that.
No, it's important, but let's not get into the jurisprudence of lawmaking. The legislature under Section 4 of the Constitution has that duty. The executive under Section 5, and then you have the judiciary under Section 6. But jurisprudence also recognizes that you can have the powers of subsidiary legislation embedded in the executive and also sometimes, judicial lawmaking.
Only that's if the legislation exists in the primary legislation.
That's right.
Yeah. And if it doesn't exist, you can't have
I understand what you're saying, but let's not digress from the key point that we are pursuing. But let's return to Mr. Ataguba. Again, for purposes of clarification, why already the rail system is undergoing some reform. The road, for instance, there's been talk for some years now about the road sector fund, how you get funding and so on and so forth. Now, if the rail system is going to be, as it were, removed from the exclusive list, you're going to have many players. What is wrong with having, again, if you can plead costs, considerations. What is the point? What is wrong with having relatively more efficient regulators dealing with each of these? But that's what the point has come up. For instance, between the NBC, that's the National Broadcasting Commission, and the NCC, they all deal with communication. That was the argument that was made. But of course, the media angle is also there, and then that's why you've had them, still separated at the moment. What is wrong with having smaller, more efficient regulators?
There are pros and there are cons.
Yes.
But there are also serious handicaps we have. One is the dearth of capacity. We don't have enough trained hands to go around. And there are synergies that are possible from what exists, from sharing resources. And of course, when we want to integrate modality, it is good that we have level playing field so that the incentives that come from government to the sectors are uniform. For a long time, the railways complained that roads, axle load limits were not being enforced on roads, which meant that you had trucks that were overloaded and no one was regulating that, and yet the railways were supposed to compete on those sort of terms. When you have a single regulator, then it is easier for you to have a harmonized playing field for all of these modes to compete. Because essentially, while you're seeking complementarity in terms of intermodal integration, you're also seeking competition so that they can improve standards and also improve the services that are available to consumers.
Well, while trying to seek out aspects of capacity, you just made mention of the data of capacity in some of these different areas, which is pushing us to look into this. You also recommended this anchor tenant model approach. What is it about, and how would that help?
Well, again, because we're migrating regulatory resources from so many different MDAs, you are now looking at quite a plethora of regulatory cultures. And therefore, what informs the adoption of the anchor tenant model is that for you to have a nucleus, an agency from which you build the bigger evolution around. And we looked around at the three agencies that would migrate wholesale into the NTC, being the Shippers Council, the Civil Aviation Authority, and the Road Safety. And we had to assess which of these three would be most suited for an anchor tenant. And we came to the conclusion that the Shippers Council provided the best fit. Hence the recommendation that the Shippers Council should be the anchor tenant.
So how would this push for greater competition, since we're seeking to actually look at the economic value this is going to be adding to us?
Well, in terms of, don't forget, these are not operators, these are regulators. This is the referee.
From regulation, you take a look at what is going to be safe for us, both on the national scene as well as on the international scene.
Yes, absolutely. And it is about robust and effective regulation. One, it gives confidence to investors that the rules by which the game will be played is clear. It also gives them the confidence that the person who will be regulating is identifiable and singular. Whereas in the existing environment, you have various regulators with powers and influence in that particular sector. You remove that confusion and you have greater clarity.
Are you sure the confusion is still not going to be there, especially when we have other legislation coming in terms of other sectors now, which is still going to be answerable to the main regulator, like you said? For multimodal transport space, and of course, two or more are being looked into now. Now, what happens whereby in the process, goods could have suffered some kind of liability, and also falling back on whatever you have now or what you are proposing to have, how do we begin to warehouse some of those areas so we would not get into serious dilemma?
Yes, just to clarify, when we say that the NTC bill establishes the NTC and its powers in terms of how it regulates the subsectors derived from subsector legislation, it is that if you look in the railway bill, you will find the powers of regulation of the NTC in the railway bill. If you take the Ports and Harbours bill that is under consideration now, you would find the powers that the NTC would have in the Ports and Harbours bill rather than in the NTC bill. So you would find the NTC being named as the regulator for that sector and how it would go about its regulation of that sector in that subsectoral bill. That is essentially the difference, and that is what makes the NTC particularly unique here.
Okay.
All right. That's a point that I would like us to trash out, and the question is going to Honorable Asado in the first instance. You talked earlier on about how much revenue the government is losing from maritime transportation, for instance, and that look, it's a sector that is probably bigger than the oil sector. We have also seen in this economy a situation where regulatory agencies have shifted from pure regulatory functions to revenue-generating agencies, so that they are more interested in issuing licenses and collecting taxes and levies and rates, and then the real regulation suffers. How is that being obviated in the current National Transport Regulatory Commission bill?
Yeah, I think democracy is improving. Nigerians are getting increasingly aware of their rights, and we keep on talking and walking. Just like Taguba just pointed out, what's going on in the National Assembly is a systematic and sequential amendment of sector, especially transport sector laws. Now that we have done, especially in the House with the National Transport Commission, today and tomorrow, like I earlier said, we are going to take public hearing. And I want to use the opportunity to invite NTA, not just to come and put camera, but also to participate.
That's what we are doing. That's what we are doing through this now.
At the public hearing, we have seen that the Ministry of Transport, which somebody was talking about, came to the public hearing and made a case for the NTC. We have seen that all these agencies that the Nigerian Railway Corporation was part of the public hearing, and they bought into the NTC. So what I'm saying essentially is that we could not, because the previous governments failed to do things right, not improve our laws to bring them to the best international standards, so that if somebody abandons his duty to see where you can extort money. There are also provisions in the law to checkmate him. Why we do public hearing like we are doing now is that members, especially when we debate bills at second readings, before it's only between legislators and the legislator. But after that, we throw it to the public, throw it to the stakeholders. You say dissect, tear it, make all these inputs, all these arguments you're making. Then we set up committees where we need to, and they review that and go back to plenary. Even then, if we pass through laws. So what I'm saying is that what you pointed out actually emphasizes why we should have NTC rather than why we shouldn't have. Because if we had the regulators that you've mentioned that we wanted to give independence as it were, and then they have left regulation to operation of money collection or money generation, we should have a further regulator where, for me, for the House, the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority is not going to disappear. It's going to be doing its work, but under an NTC law. And the Nigerian Civil Aviation law will now be reflecting that there is a regulator where we operate through. The person which we are doing today and tomorrow, the draft shows that the MPA is recognizing that there is an NTC that domiciles its own regulation, and regulators from the MPA who have the requisite experience will practice under the NTC, and NTC belongs to all of them and to no one specifically.
All right, well, Honorable Asado, I'm sure the relevant stakeholders will still make their representation to you. I mean, ours is to provide a platform for a multiplicity of ideas and so on and so forth. Khalid Singh, I would like you to also respond to this. How do we stymie the current practice of regulatory agencies behaving like revenue-generating agencies? Is that going to be obviated in the Transport Commission if once it is set up? And another point, I don't know how this will work out. The NCAA, it's a highly technical subsector. We've had, stakeholders come on this program to complain about what is going on. Now you want to bring it under some other grandfather, and then you'll be saying that I don't know. But let's deal with this question of the proper regulation as regulation and not regulation as revenue generation.
You see, sitting down here thinking, right? I've suddenly realized that that we have a huge vacuum that we're not really focusing on. And what we're having in the 8th House of the National Assembly is that for the first time, the National Assembly is driving reform. Because what's missing here is a national transport policy. Because all these debates and all these discussions should be enshrined in the National Transport Policy document produced by the Ministry of Transport.
There is one. No, there is. Amechi was on this program, and he indicated, and we have...
Excuse me.
We'll like a copy. We'll like a copy. When you go to his office,
No.
On that program. He said it.
You have just confirmed that there is one. Could you please send me a copy?
I'm not a spokesperson.
Who told you?
Honorable Chukwuke Amechi, the Minister of Transportation, indicated on Good Morning Nigeria that there exists a national transportation policy.
Can I explain something?
That's the point.
Can I explain something?
Yeah, go ahead with your explanation.
In 2002, very quickly, we drafted a national transport policy bill. It went to the Federal Executive Council in 2006. It was stepped down because we were told to harmonize it with roads. In 2010, we drafted another draft transport policy, which eventually got to the Federal Executive Council. In 2012, again, it was stepped down. So between 2012 and 2017, except if I've kept my eye off the ball.
Most likely.
Yeah?
We get it from
I'm not his consultant.
So that's the issue.
But yeah, they have.
So that's the issue. So that's
the make his point.
Yeah, but just make your point.
So please, I think, I think, without that document, that's why we're having this debate, because it should bring clarity to the sector. It should bring clarity to the thinking of government, which the legislature should actually follow. Now, going back to your original question about the revenue generation, it's important for these regulators to be self-funding to the extent that they can fund their own activities. They should be able to generate revenue, ring-fence their funds, subject to what the National Assembly says with regards to the Federation account, but at least so that they can manage their own affairs. A lot of work has to go into the establishment of these agencies. Yeah. With regard to the NCAA, sorry, I'm not really an aviation expert, but I know that the safety regulatory aspects of the NCAA, if subsumed into the NTC in accordance with international conventions, will obviously have to go through an improved process, because if you're looking for real independence of a regulator, all the decisions of the regulator must be independent and does not have to go through any minister. So therefore, the regulator, like the NCC or NERC, reports directly to National Assembly and not the executive. What we have in the NCAA bill is that the regulator reports to the minister. So with the new NTC bill, that's taken away completely, and we're creating, like the NCC and NERC, a truly independent regulatory authority that the private sector and everybody wants in order to attract investment into that.
Sorry, what's the rationale? What's the rationale for making, let's say, the Transport Regulatory Commission report to the National Assembly?
The basis of reform is that you separate policy from regulation from operation, right? That's the basis, fundamental of any reform. So you have your policy existing within governance, you have your regulation existing within the independent regulator like NCC and NERC, we have that already. Then we have the operators providing the service. Once you split those three functions, you create what we classify as an enabling environment for private sector participation. Because the private sector knows that the regulator's decision is independent and not dependent on politics.
All right. Why have them report? Why have the National Assembly? That's the question I'm asking, and not to the executive branch.
Well,
yes, Honorable Asado.
They don't actually report to the National Assembly, report to the presidency. Now, it's under the Secretary to Government. Most of these commissions, the NCC, now, but they have independence from the ministry. What we try to do is to not have super ministers who eventually, I don't want to say that they are not doing well, because some of the postings and some of the rotations do not even allow a minister to stabilize and understand the sector he's ministering to before he's moved. So when a commission is created, it takes it away from the ministry's control to the control of the president we voted for, who a lot of time has domiciled it in the
SGS office.
Now, why the National Assembly is much more comfortable with commissions is that you are telling me now, as a chairman of a key committee in the transport sector, that the transport policy to the minister. For me, I know there is no national transport policy, and that all these bills we are generating, and these are private members' bills, which ordinarily we should sit back. They just will bring out what policy they want and which laws will suit the policy. But when we see that we're going nowhere, we need to go down and do it for the executive, do it for the legislature, and sometimes do it for the public. So I think that we should celebrate the NTC as first. We want to get it right, and we have, for the first time, created enough agreement within a public hearing to have a bill. Now, no deal will be made and we say you cannot change it. What we've done is perfect, is cast in stone. This is not God's law. This is our own idea of where we should start. He has been emphasizing the fact that it's a graduated process. We are not killing any agency. We are just saying, like you pointed out, that within the international sector, there's also IMO for the maritime organization, but they are not going to, all those things must be also tweeted to fit our Nigerian experience.
I just for purposes of clarification, a policy is a document that can be finalized or is finalized at the level of the Federal Executive Council.
Correct.
A policy doesn't require the concurrence of the National Assembly.
No,
does it?
No, no.
That's what says that as long as the Federal Executive Council has not passed it, there is nothing for us to refer to.
All right, so I'm sure that's a question that you have to deal with.
You see, we'll get the copy from those people.
No, not from me.
But the independence that we're looking at, but the independence that we're looking at, really just to clarify, is financial independence, so therefore they don't have to go to the line ministry to get their budgets approved. The appointments and firing of key staff is actually, nominated by the president and approved by the National Assembly. So you have that independence.
The one issue that we didn't talk about now, NIMASA, NIMASA, all of these things will be coming and going. But gentlemen, I'm sure these are issues that the stakeholders will deal with. We can't exhaust everything possible.
On this particular issue. edition of the program. There are tweets already too. Let's quickly run through them, and then we'll wrap up the discussion. Sani Michael Omako JK, now with this bill passed, Nigerians hope it's not just going to be business as usual, but that efficiency will be a hallmark.
Kubana Basi again, the sanity you want to bring in, how effective and efficient is it going to improve the current status of the transport sector? Is this bill the major problem facing the transport sector? Please, personal interest should not be paramount.
Clifford Agwesi, development of appropriate indigenous technology needs to be an essential feature of the imminent bill. What is the place of local content in the NTC bill? It's time now, it's time now right for us to have undergrounds in our transport system as in other climes?
Usman Abubakar, is it going to ease the life of the common man and low-level workers nationwide?
Dele Jackson Solomon, issue of bad roads, inefficient rail, sloppy port operations, and dropping efficiency levels in the aviation industry must be dealt with squarely.
All right. Well, those are some of the tweets that were taken. Of course, there's some from what you can get from the tweets. There are some conflicting issues there with those who will actually provide the services, those who will build the underground rail system, and those who will regulate those who are constructing and running those subways. We'd like to thank our three guests who have been with us this morning. Of course, there's still a lot of work to do. Mr. Roland Atagoba, CEO Bethlehem Rail, and it's also on the Technical Advisory Committee to the House of Reps on Rail Bill and National Transport Commission Bill. Mr. Atagoba, thank you for your contributions to our conversation this morning.
Thank you very much.
We also would like to thank Mr. Kayode Khalidson, of course, the Senior Partner of Infrastructure Delivery International. Thanks a lot for your thoughts.
Thank you very much.
As well as Honorable Dr. Patrick Asadu, Chairman of the House Committee on Ports, Harbours and Waterways. Thanks a lot for being part of our discussion.
Let me quickly invite you to the public hearing today and tomorrow.
Okay, so well, that does it for our discussion segment, second discussion segment on Good Morning Nigeria. We'll move on now to the complimentary, and Blessing comes in with sports.
Yes, talking sports, second round of the Nigerian Professional Football League games resumed over the weekend, and champions Chelsea set English Premier League record as Arsenal missed Champions League spot. In tennis, Novak Djokovic loses Italian Open final. Let's find out more from